Simon Cowell started bleeding when 5-year-old said, "I can taste your sins through the TV." The words pierced Simon Cowell's soul like shards of broken glass. 5-year-old Aria Thompson stood motionless on the Britain's Got Talent stage, her tiny voice carrying an otherworldly authority that froze everyone in Studio One. "I can taste your sins through the TV, Mr. Cowell. They taste like poison and broken dreams." What happened next defied every law of medicine and physics. Simon Cowell's nose began bleeding. Not a trickle, but a steady stream of crimson that stained his black shirt as he sat paralyzed with terror. For the first time in his career, the most powerful man in entertainment was bleeding from words alone, and what this child knew about his darkest secrets would expose horrors that should have stayed buried forever. But to understand how 5 simple words from a child made Simon Cowell's body manifest physical trauma, we need to go back to where this supernatural nightmare began. It was a humid August morning at the London Palladium, and Britain's Got Talent was conducting auditions for what would become the most disturbing episode in television history. Simon sat in his familiar position, that calculated expression of bored superiority, firmly in place, ready for another day of crushing dreams with surgical precision. The morning had been predictably mundane: singers who couldn't carry a tune, dancers who couldn't find rhythm, and acts that defied both logic and good taste. Simon had delivered his trademark brutal critiques with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine, each dismissal adding another layer to his reputation as entertainment's most feared judge. "Next up," announced the production coordinator through the studio speakers, "we have Aria Thompson, age 5, from Edinburgh. She says she has a special gift." Simon barely glanced up from his notes. Children claiming special gifts were as common as rain in London, usually meaning they could wiggle their ears or recite the alphabet backwards. He prepared himself for another 3 minutes of manufactured cuteness, but when Aria Thompson walked onto that stage, something was immediately and profoundly wrong. She moved with an unnatural stillness that was disturbing in someone so young. Her platinum blonde hair hung perfectly straight around a face that was too pale, too serious, too knowing for a 5-year-old. She wore a simple white dress that seemed to glow under the stage lights, and her eyes held depths that seemed impossible for someone who had barely learned to tie her shoes. "Hello there, sweetheart," Simon said, his voice taking on the warmer tone he reserved for very young contestants. "What's your name?" "Aria Thompson," she replied, but her voice carried no childish excitement or nervousness. It was flat, emotionless, like someone reading from a script written in another dimension. "And you're 5 years old?" "Yes, Mr. Cowell. I've been watching you on TV since I could see colors, and I can taste things through the screen." Simon's eyebrow raised slightly. Children said odd things, but this was unusually specific. "You can taste things through the TV. That's interesting. What kind of things?" Aria tilted her head, studying Simon with an intensity that made him unconsciously lean back in his chair. "I can taste emotions, Mr. Cowell. Fear tastes like metal. Sadness tastes like salt. Joy tastes like sunshine." The studio audience was unusually quiet, sensing something unsettling about this tiny contestant. Amanda Holden looked concerned. Alicia Dixon had stopped smiling entirely. David Walliams was fidgeting more than usual. "And what do you taste when you look at me, Aria?" Simon asked, trying to maintain his professional composure despite a growing sense of unease. That's when Aria Thompson said the words that would shatter Simon Cowell's reality. "I can taste your sins through the TV, Mr. Cowell. They taste like poison and broken dreams." The moment the words left her mouth, something impossible happened. Simon's nose began to bleed. Not a small trickle, not the kind of nosebleed that might be explained by dry air or stress. A steady, unstoppable stream of blood that immediately stained his crisp black shirt and dripped onto his notes. The studio fell into shocked silence. Simon touched his nose, looked at his blood-covered fingers with complete bewilderment, then looked back at Aria, who was watching him with those impossibly knowing eyes. "How—" Simon started to speak, but more blood flowed from his nose, forcing him to grab tissues from the judges' table. Aria continued speaking, as if making a man bleed through supernatural means was perfectly normal. "The taste gets stronger when you hurt children, Mr. Cowell. It tastes like the tears of 1,000 broken hearts, like the screams you pretend not to hear when they go home and cry themselves to sleep." Simon's hands were shaking now as he tried to stop the bleeding, but the blood kept coming. Medical personnel began moving toward the stage, but Aria raised her small hand and they froze mid-step. "I taste Emily Rodriguez from 2018, Aria continued, her 5-year-old voice carrying the weight of supernatural judgment. She was 7 when you told her she'd never be good enough for anything. She tastes like hospital rooms and sleeping pills. Simon's face went white beneath the blood. Emily Rodriguez. He remembered her now. A little girl who'd sung off-key and received one of his harsher critiques. But how could this child possibly know what happened to contestants after they left the show? I taste Michael Chen from 2020, Aria continued relentlessly. He was 9 when you laughed at his magic tricks. He tastes like Bridgewater and Final Goodbyes. The blood was flowing faster now, and Simon was beginning to panic. This wasn't medically possible. Words couldn't cause bleeding. Children couldn't know these things. But the evidence was literally dripping from his face. Stop, Simon whispered, his voice barely audible. Please, just stop. But Aria was far from finished delivering her supernatural testimony. I taste Sarah Williams from 2019. She was 8 when you said her dancing looked like a dying fish. She tastes like garage exhaust and letters never sent. Each name hit Simon like a physical blow. These were children whose stories had been buried, whose post-show tragedies had been covered up by NDAs and legal settlements. There was no way this 5-year-old could know these details. How do you know these names? Simon asked desperately, blood now flowing freely down his chin. Because their pain lives in the TV waves, Mr. Cowell, Aria replied with chilling certainty. Every time you hurt a child on camera, their suffering gets trapped in the broadcast signal, and I can taste all of it when I watch your shows. Simon's bleeding intensified, and something even more disturbing began happening. His vision started to blur, and for brief moments, he could swear he saw translucent figures of children standing behind Aria, children with sad eyes and accusatory stares. Make it stop, Simon pleaded, no longer caring about his reputation or the cameras capturing every second of his breakdown. I can't make it stop, Mr. Cowell, Aria said sadly. The taste is too strong now. 23 children have died because of words you said on this stage. Their pain fills up the whole studio. The number hit Simon like a sledgehammer. 23. How could she possibly know the exact number of contestants' suicides that had been linked to his rejections? That's impossible, Simon gasped through the blood. You're 5 years old. You can't know these things. I know because I can see them, Mr. Cowell, Aria replied, looking just past Simon's shoulder. They're all standing behind you right now. They've been following you for years, waiting for someone who could taste their pain and speak their truth. Simon spun around in his chair, but saw nothing except empty space. When he turned back to Aria, her expression had changed. No longer the eerily calm child, she looked genuinely sad. They don't want to hurt you, Mr. Cowell, she said softly. They just want you to feel what they felt. They want you to taste the poison you put in their hearts. The bleeding reached a crescendo, and Simon Cowell, the man who had never backed down from anyone, collapsed forward onto the judge's table, his blood pooling around his notes and buzzer. Paramedics rushed the stage as Aria stood silently, watching the chaos unfold. But just before they reached Simon, she spoke one final time. The bleeding will stop when you stop making children bleed inside, Mr. Cowell. But the taste will never go away. Every time you look in a mirror, you'll taste what I taste. Every time you close your eyes, you'll see what I see. Simon was rushed to the hospital, where doctors found no medical reason for the severe nosebleed. His blood pressure was normal, his clotting factors were fine, and there was no physical trauma that could explain what had happened. The episode never aired. The footage was classified at the highest levels and buried so deep that most BGT staff were told it never existed. Aria Thompson and her family disappeared from London that same day, and no amount of investigation could locate them. But Simon Cowell was forever changed. Those who worked with him reported that he would sometimes stop mid-sentence and look around frantically, as if seeing things that weren't there. He began experiencing frequent nosebleeds with no medical explanation, always preceded by what he described as tasting metal and sadness. Most disturbing of all, Simon started a foundation for children who had been rejected from talent shows, quietly funding therapy and support for young performers dealing with the aftermath of public humiliation. When asked why he'd suddenly become so interested in contestant welfare, Simon would only say, "Because I learned that words have taste, and some tastes never wash out of your mouth." The 5-year-old who claimed she could taste sins through television had given Simon Cowell a gift no doctor could explain, and no amount of money could cure: the ability to experience, physically and viscerally, the pain he had caused others. And according to those close to him, every day since that supernatural encounter, Simon Cowell wakes up with the taste of broken dreams and childhood tears in his mouth, a constant reminder that some sins are too powerful to hide, even from a 5-year-old who sees too much and knows things she shouldn't know. The bleeding had stopped, but the tasting would last forever.